Really, really worth having happy teams. They are more successful teams. They're more collaborative, they're more creative, they retain staff more, they're healthier, they're more productive. There's just so many good successes of happy teams, and they are really achievable. It's about people skills in the business and supporting team leaders to dare to have better conversations.
So if you look at the state of the world today, and it doesn't matter when this recording gets played because the world is sort of kind of in chaos, you know how badly we need today's guest, who is a happiness expert. He's called a statistician with the soul, which I just love that. And I'll just tease you with that, because he'll explain more as we go along. He's also a TEDx talk person, and I am so excited and so proud and so honored to have today's guest, Nic Marks, with us from across the pond. Welcome, Nic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patty Ann. Nice to meet you.
All right, great. So, you have as your tagline, I believe, happiness is a serious business.
Yes.
Pray tell.
Well, I think this with work, is that people are the heart of all businesses. And when people feel good, they do good work. And when they feel miserable, they do miserable work. So there is this great alignment there's this potential great alignment, which I've still got to persuade the whole business world about. But the potential alignment is that,
right,
is that if you create happy teams, it works for everybody. It works for the employee, it works for the team leader because it makes their life much easier, and it works for the business because people are more productive and they stay longer. Staff retention improves. There are lots of other benefits too, but basically it's good for everybody, happiness. Yeah.
Right. It's so interesting because I work with both entrepreneurs and corporate execs, right? Which is really unusual. Usually people do one or the other.
Yeah.
And I feel like entrepreneurs get it. But why do you think there's such resistance to bringing happiness, oh, heaven forbid, into the workplace, in the corporate world, right? In the soul-crushing, at times, corporate world?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I once was speaking with this guy we hadn't met, and he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a statistician. I work on happiness at work." And he looked really quizzically at me and he goes, "Well, I understand the word happiness and I understand the word work, but I'd never thought of putting them in the same sentence together." And
no, was that recent? Was that very recent?
Yeah, it was quite recent. And basically, he was just saying he didn't really think about people's happiness. Thinks about their productivity, thinks about the work they do. But he's now a friend of mine. It's about 4 or 5 years ago that he said that. And I think there's, with happiness, people think it's that happy clappy, that it's that sort of, very exuberant feeling. But happiness is really quite serious. When we feel good, life is much better. And when we feel bad, we need to change things. And in that sense, it's actually a very deep evolutionary signal within us, the emotion of, happiness and unhappiness is. And so it makes a lot of sense. Why are they frightened of it? They're frightened of it because I think they worry that teams will be slacking. If they're happy, they won't be as productive. I think that's the fear. And of course,
and actually the opposite is true.
The opposite is mainly true. Yes, absolutely. So there's a strong correlation between happiness and productivity, but there's some independence. So it's quite feasible to have teams that are slacking, but that's your problem. You haven't said.
But they could be slacking and be miserable too.
Well, okay, they could be. What I mean by slacking is that they're happy and low performance. So I think of it as a 2x2 quadrant of performance and happiness. So if you're happy and high performing, that's a great team. If you're unhappy and low performing, that's a miserable team. But if you're happy and low performing, you're slacking. If you are unhappy and high performing, you're burning out. But those teams won't last. And the only way to create sustainable high performance, I think, is to keep teams happy. It's as simple as that.
Okay. So tell us what you mean by you're a statistician of the soul.
With the soul. It was a
with
client.
With the soul.
A client once wrote it in a testimonial, and then of course my marketing director loved it. In fact, I love it because in a way, because it's sort of you think of a statistician as very dry. And of course, I do stuff about happiness. I mean, my career has developed from doing hard statistics on quality of life into doing statistics on well-being and happiness over the last 15, 20 years. And so I just think it takes people by surprise that a statistician can be good at relationships, good at talking, empathetic. So in a way, I've got that combination between soft and hard skills, though, as you said earlier, we shouldn't use the word soft, we should use essential for the human skills. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us, how did you go from being a hardcore statistician to a happiness expert? Because I will give you full disclosure. So when I was in college, I went to New York University and I studied pretty much sciences, right? And I had to take a class on stats. And, it's not that it was so difficult for me, but it's just not my passion, right? So, I wanted to check the box. So there was a class Wednesday night from 6 to 9. So I signed up for it because it didn't get in the way of everything else in my life that I really wanted to do. But here's what I really did. I rarely went to the class. I would sort of kind of go in and let the professor see me, although it was a big hall, and sit in the back. And I was at NYU, and I don't know if you know, there's this very famous old pub in Greenwich Village called McSorley's. So every Wednesday night, everybody knew Patty Ann was going to be at McSorley's at 7:00. I just found it honestly so boring. But I know some people love it. Like they love it. My joke is if I die and I find out I'm an accountant, I went to hell. So tell me about that.
Well, numbers have always been my natural aptitude. I was the really annoying guy at school who was top of maths without trying. That's just who I was. I could do that. And
are you a musician as well, by any chance?
I'm not a musician. No, I'm not. There were
because there's a lot of synergy there. You probably could be.
Well, yeah, I never learned that, and I can't keep a beat, so I'm not sure. But my wife always complains, not about I'm an exuberant dancer, but I don't keep time well.
Okay.
I went to Cambridge to read math before I even really made a decision. I was just top of my year and scholar, and what I found was when I got to university to do math, I didn't like maths, didn't like mathematics, because it was too pure. And I found that what I was really interested in.
Hang on, what do you mean by pure?
Pure math means that you are doing, so there's normally when you get to higher levels of math, you have applied maths, which is solving problems in the world, and pure math, which is basically looking at the pattern of things. So you get very obscure, and I didn't like that. And math got very pure at university.
So it was too esoteric.
Yes. And you didn't see any numbers. You saw a lot of Greek letters. You had a lot of proof, a lot of set theory. And I just...
Alpha, beta, what else do you need to know?
Yeah, you had all of those. And so I switched into basically systems thinking and applied statistics. And I loved it. So I was solving real problems, queuing theory, you're doing simulations of stuff.
So what's a problem? What's a real problem that you solve with stats like that? What is it that you solve besides like marketing? You do consumer research?
Well, you could
I'm
do
just
that.
showing my ignorance.
Well, statistics basically, numbers are the language of business. I mean, keeping your accounts as statistics, it depends, and actually the statistics I do around happiness isn't very sophisticated. It's basically putting numbers on things which mean things and then looking to optimize those numbers, Okay,
hang on. Putting numbers on things that mean things. You have to operationalize that. But tell it to a third grader, meaning me.
Okay. So I started off, as I said, doing hard statistics on quality of life and a lot on sustainability. This is in the 1990s. I was very into the idea of sustainable development. And I really worked out that actually the stats on climate and on resource use was fairly clear, but nobody knew what quality of life was, because that was the block. Because obviously, if we're going to deal with climate crisis, we have to think about lifestyles, and that's hard because, it's the way we live. So actually, what do we get out of a lifestyle? What we get quality of life? Do we enjoy our lives?
Well, can you define seriously, for research purposes, how do you define quality of life? Right? Because I might think I have a good quality of life and somebody else might have a very different definition of quality of life, or no?
Yeah, that's quite possible. So, normally in sort of hard statistics, it will be defined as things around the quality of housing, the quality of local environment you're in, obviously your income. So things like that. And I found those, they're called objective indicators, dry. And what I wanted to do was to get to people's feelings. And, and that might sound, I mean, one of the things I haven't told you about was when I was young, I trained as a therapist. So I didn't only have statistical skills, but I also was a psychotherapist. I didn't actually do very long being a psychotherapist, but it really changed my perception.
What spurred your interest in that? You were a math person, right? Yeah. So you don't usually think of somebody studying math then going to be trained as a psychotherapist.
My mother was a therapist.
Now, I'm not sure what you mean by your mother. Everything's our mother's fault. Or do you mean your mother was a therapist?
She was a therapist. She was a family therapist. And I still like, my mother's still alive. I like her way of being. And I think
Which is what?
She's calm, she's kind, and she's perceptive. And she's good with people. She'll listen to people. And if I used to tease her that, she was so busy listening, she forgot to say what she thought sometimes.
Interesting.
But and so I got interested in that partly through her, and I was interested. We all have I didn't have any big T traumas, but we've all got our little T traumas. We've all got our things which happen to us, and I was kind of interested to sort of work out how I could not let those things that hadn't worked out for me define me. And then so that's kind of why I got interested in it. Yeah.
Okay, so go back to the quality of life conversation, how that related to being a statistician, and so you're defining quality of life, and then how are you applying stats to it in a way that makes a difference in the world?
Okay, so I basically started moving to what we call subjective indicators, which is where you ask people in surveys. So you're
very subjective. Yeah,
it's subjective, but that subjective can be used two ways in the English language. So it can be used as that of subjective, it's only someone's opinion and you dismiss it. But in statistical terms, subjective means that the person is the subject of the study. So it's got a different definition. And if you want to ask people if you want to know how people's lives are going, you're going to have to ask them, because from the outside, you can't know. I mean, you can have somebody who's living in good circumstances, they all look good, but they feel miserable inside. So, and you can have other people with the opposite, so you need to ask people. And so what I started to discover was that there were these statisticians, these psychologists, these economists who were starting to use surveys to understand people's experience of life. And I just found that fascinating. And, that's what I've kind of done for 20 years.
So that now it makes sense. I see how you married your unique ability with numbers to your passion for happiness rooted in your mom.
Yeah.
That sort of kind of makes sense. All right. So tell us something about yourself that influenced who you are today, that nobody knows about, that you can't read about, that we can't Google you about. It's not in your bio, but it very much formed who Nic Marks is today.
I mean, that's a hard question to answer because I'm quite open. So, I mean, I would always say that my therapy training.
Everybody says that, but everybody comes up with something.
Something that defines me. I mean,
well, it helps define you. Helps define you.
I find that a difficult question to answer because
Good.
I think my statistics define me. I think my interest in therapy defines me, because it's an inquiring way of being. I mean, God, what else defines me? I mean, of course, the quality of my relationships, which have been up and down. And
maybe the answer is in the relationships, if they've been up and down. Maybe you can share some of that.
Um, okay, I don't know. So I think my father was quite a typical father. He was very busy. He was very successussful. He was very absent, and I think that absence.
What did he do? What did he do?
He ran a business, family
His
business.
own?
Yeah,
A family
well,
business.
he ran it.
Okay.
Well, he ran it with his brother, and they argued a lot. So
Oh.
that,
I work with business partners. I get it.
yeah, and well, particularly difficult with brothers. My grandfather was a very. I mean, it was he grew the business, and he set his two sons in competition, which was so stupid. We're talking just after the Second World War, and
what was the business? What was the business? What type of work?
It made sweets, made candy.
Okay.
So and so I grew up in a household which, Dad was great on holidays, but he wasn't there very much. I mean, I never played soccer or any games with him, and he didn't come to my school. So I guess that absence of close relationship with my father has affected me, because it made me want to. I think we all want to be better parents than our parents. And so that's one of the, not everybody.
How do you think of course that impacts us, and our parents impact us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what do you feel your biggest challenge is to this day related to his absence? Now, you're talking physical absence. Are you talking about emotional absence as well?
I got very connected with Dad in my 20s and 30s, and we had a very good relationship through adulthood. But in childhood, I suppose one of the things you always try to do, I think everyone tries to do, is you try to impress your absent father, and you try and I rejected his passions. That was my sort of FU to him, if I can say that. And I decided.
What was one of the passions that you rejected?
He was a big sailor. He loved sailing.
Oh, okay.
But he raced. He didn't do like nice, gentle dinghy sailing.
He was a sailor. Yeah, sailor.
He was very competitive, and it was no fun. He didn't want you to sail with him as a child. He wanted to sail with men. And so I think that my view of masculinity is slightly, my dad was lovely. He was a good people person in his business, but he just was quite absent in the family. And I think my idea of masculinity is partly from him, but it's also partly rejecting him. Yeah. And so
how did you come back in your 20s? Was he retired?
The business got sold in my 20s. So yes, he retired. He was about my age now. He's about late 50s when he sold it. I'm late 50s, and which sometimes that strikes me as interesting. He retired at my age. I don't feel like retiring at all. But he, I mean.
So did you? I have to ask you this: did you reject candy as well?
Not exactly.
Of course not. I'm teasing you.
I got a sweet tooth. So actually, I don't actually particularly like candy. So they made real sugar candies. I'm much more of a chocolate person if I'm having sweet. And they didn't make chocolate. But yeah. How
did watching your mom be a therapist, I assume she worked as a therapist, and your dad be away, how do you feel that influenced the work you do today in a positive and a negative way?
So I think that the work I do is a blend, because my dad was a businessman, my mum was a therapist, and I'm a statistician. And I end up being the person that does statistics about happiness at work. So in that way, I can see it as a sort of integration or synthesis between them all. And my dad actually really got to love what I was doing, in his last, 5-10 years of life. He died 8 years ago. And I, so I guess it's a blend between it. Yeah.
So I have to ask, and I know I'm asking you to do a guesstimate, but would your dad's company have hired you? Did he care about the happiness of his people at work?
He absolutely did, actually. And
when he was younger, before you became close?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He was very innovative. And he used to particularly take his senior leaders on retreats where they would, think about their whole lives outside of work.
So they would hire you and me.
They would hire people like us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they definitely, it was a in a sense,
he was ahead of his time in that way.
Oh yeah, no, he had a woman head of personnel in the 1970s, which was pretty rare in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. Well, personnel's HR though, right? That's where the women show up in business. So
but still, she was a director, and I think that was unusual in the 70s. And he, yes, it was the more feminine side, but he had women in other parts of the business too. But he was innovative. Yeah.
Was he able to maintain his relationship with his brother outside of the company?
They had a very fractious one, but yes, I mean, to an extent. But my uncle was given no choice but to go into the business, and it didn't suit him.
Was your dad older?
No, my dad was younger, so that made it even more catastrophic because my dad was more successful in the business than my uncle. And my uncle was very smart, but he wasn't happy. And he should have been a barrister or lawyer. He had one of those brains, which is very clever, really good at constructing arguments.
Very different, though.
But not good for running a family business,
Okay, so Nic, tell me. So knowing your uncle as well as you do, and I think all the listeners understand different types of brains for different professions, right?
Yeah.
How would you use your work to try to influence his happiness, right? You have a round peg, you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
Yeah. With
your uncle in the business.
Yeah.
How would you come to the rescue, so to speak?
I mean, it's very trite, but I would say it's really important to do work that you enjoy, that you love. And I think my uncle was not given that choice. They were both told they had to go in the family business. So I feel quite a lot of compassion for him on that. And so I would steer the conversation to what he really wants to do and try and encourage him to be brave enough to do that. That would have been, he really could have done that after my grandfather had died. He could have said, I don't want to do this, but quite difficult when you're in your 40s to retrain, particularly when you're high business and to do stuff. So I think he never found what he really wanted to do. Whereas my father, to be fair, he was a very good manager and he enjoyed it. So, yeah. So they were very different.
You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd followed in your father's footsteps?
There was a small opportunity when I was young to do that. I wasn't ready for it. Who knows what I'd have felt like in my 30s or 40s, but he decided to sell the business, which was very sensible. It's a very good time to sell it. And actually that gave me an unseen advantage in that I had enough money to buy a house. And so when I started my career, I was able to follow what I really wanted to rather than necessarily having to chase the money to earn.
So you enjoyed the fruits of his labor, if you will.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's given me freedom in my career, which I mean, people do what I do without that freedom. But, I think it was an important part of I could specialize in something that wasn't very fashionable in the 90s and early 2000s. And so, I think that was a great advantage to me for sure.
Well, I mean, even if you think about it now, I wouldn't even know if it's coming into fashion. I just feel like there's a large element of business that just begrudgingly accepts, we got to figure out this work-life balance stuff for these women. We got to figure out this happiness, how are we going to kind of thing. So I think we're coming around to it, but I think it's begrudgingly. And I think it was Zappos is their motto, choosing happiness. Is it right?
Delivering happiness.
Delivering happiness, right? And it's shoes. But they absolutely, and of course it was sad what happened to the founder, but that their whole business model came from that, right? Like they didn't have a script when you call the call center, like I need size 8 in black and I don't see it. And the person goes and gets it and ships it. And so you're preaching to the choir from me, but who is your ideal client? And give us an example of a success story.
So just to wind back, because I knew Tony Shea quite well.
Okay.
CEO of Zappos.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So sad. It was so sad.
Yeah, it was very sad. So, I mean, actually, I mean, the tragic thing for Tony was that he built a business around connection, and he struggled with connection himself.
It's like the shoemaker's kids have no shoes.
Yeah, and he wanted to create this whole community around him, and he did that in his business. He did it in the way he lived and his lifestyle, but he never really connected with people. He, you know, right. I mean, I probably met him 20, 30 times, and I worked with him on some projects, and so I knew him a bit, you know. But a friend of mine who
could you tell he struggled with his own happiness?
Yes.
How?
Yes. Oh, there was a distance about him, and he just went through relationships very quickly. He was a slightly, and he, you know, like if you were in a party,
all relationships, personal, business, which ones?
Yeah, I think both. I mean, I saw it particularly with women, but if you were in a party with Tony, he would be the one trying to, you know, make a game where everyone else is drinking shots. He'd like try and be in control of it. And I think that was his sort of way of, you know, protecting himself. So he was quite,
and it does keep people at bay.
Yeah. And I liked him, but he wasn't easy to just connect with. And I think that was the rather tragedy about him. But he was brilliant, and he did build Zappos absolutely on that belief that the only way to have happy customers was to have happy employees, and and they did a lot of work on that. And it was very, for a Brit, it's very American. It's very high five. It's very energetic, sort of energetic type of happiness in Zappos. And
yeah, we got a little bit of swagger going on.
Yeah, but he built $1 billion business, you know, and that wasn't even the first business he did. He'd already built and sold a business in his 20s. So, you know, he was very, very smart, very, very good businessman. But back to your other question about ideal clients. So we work with a lot with tech or tech-enabled businesses. And the reason that we do that is because I create... So I created this business called Friday Pulse, which is basically a platform to measure and improve team happiness. And because it's a
so the techs would like that because you're giving them the numbers.
Absolutely. And it really works well. It works well with people who are desk-based. It theoretically could work in anything, but it's actually just building the tech that people can use it easily. Whereas in that sort of thing, they're used to it. They're used to agile ways of working where they work in sprints and they review, and basically, you know, my idea about how do you build team happiness at work is that teams should always be reviewing how they're getting on, because they're going to have good and bad weeks. Mm-hmm. You know, and we all do. And you can't be happy all of the time at work. That would be dysfunctional, probably.
That would be over-medicated.
Yes. Yeah. So you know, it's actually a signal when you're unhappy. It's a signal to change things, and businesses need to pick up that signal. So I think of everyone in an organization a bit like a sensor, you know, like you build a thermostat, and, you know, so everyone's got their own little thermostat. And if you ask them every week, you know, how are they, you actually get a really good temperature of what's going on in the company at any time. And go ahead. I just going to say that's easier to implement in businesses which are tech enabled. Yeah,
so that absolutely is fantastic. So here's what companies do, though. They have this thing called NPS, NPR, and National Promoter Score. NPS,
Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter tells you how much I care about that, right? How much credit I give it. One question. And these executives go apeshit over it. Like if somebody's running a team and, you know, it scores low, I'm not happy here. I wouldn't refer somebody here. And, you know, and then somebody that could be an Attila the Hun manager, but the score is high once a year. So what do you think about that? And how do you counter that?
So Net Promoter Score is a question which is, how likely would it be you recommend this organization as a great place to work to a friend? It's basically something.
Something like
It's a terrible question because
Silly. Yeah, thank you. It's not just me being a jerk. Okay.
No, it's a terrible question. I mean, it's okay. It's an employee advocacy question, but
if it was one of several.
Yeah, well, it's the reason it's bad is that we're putting ourselves in a hypothetical future situation, and we're imagining what we would do with a hypothetical person. So that's a long way away from our experience. The second thing is it's just the organization's agenda. It's not my agenda as the employee, whereas if you ask them, how happy were you this week or how well your work went this week, then that's my agenda. So it changes it. It's like employee engagement. I understand why people want to measure employee engagement because it's productivity. I mean, basically engagement is a code word for productivity. And that's fine. That's fine. But it's not the employees engage. But it's not the employee's agenda is they want to go to work. They want to, have a reasonable time there. They want to do good work and go home. And so if you really want to know what's going on for the employee, get onto their terms. And their terms are, was I happy at work this week? And you can be unhappy at work for lots of different reasons. Mm-hmm. I mean, Tolstoy once wrote, didn't he, that every happy family is the same and every unhappy family has its own way of it. And it's the same with happiness at work. It's happy teams. They've got clear vision of where they're going. They've got good relationships. They're treated fairly. They're treated respectfully. They're not micromanaged. They're stretched. They love what they're doing. It's the same. Unhappiness at work can be for a million different reasons. It can be your boss. It can be when I ask people in workshops. Sometimes when you've got enough trust in a workshop, you have to have enough trust and built it. If I ask them, tell me about a bad experience at work. I mean, you get some extraordinary. From the women, you get a lot of sexual harassment. You get, you get an absolute ton of it. It's just so much more than we realize out there, and and you can get things. I've had people,
and for all the effort that's been put into it, trust me, very little has changed.
Yes, yeah. I've got two stepdaughters. They're in their 20s, and you talk to them about it. They go, "Oh, I've just been harassed so many times," and it's like, what the. I don't know. I find it I'm not that type of man. So
that's because your mother was a therapist.
I have 3 older sisters as well, so I'm very, very relaxed with women.
The men that know the most about women are the men that have had sisters. That is such an advantage in life.
Yeah,
such an advantage. Did anybody ever tell you? It's true. Like my brothers, I have 2 brothers, and they have 3 sisters. Everything they know about women, they learn from growing up with women.
Yeah, and particularly they're all older than me, and so
even better.
That's
even better
because it's like I had to follow them. Yeah, and So
you'd see them crying over the guy and what am I going to wear and their menstrual cycle and all that stuff. Yeah. It's
So I've forgotten where we're going, but
talking about the engagement at work, productivity, the silly score.
Yeah. So
and making it be about the employee, not the company.
Yeah. So so employee net promoter score is a measure of employee brand ambassador, and that's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's not a measure of employee experience. If you want to ask about employee experience, ask how it is for them, not ask what you want out of them. Ask how it is for them and turn that around. And of course, that makes a new psychological contract with the employee. Because if I say to you, as a sort of business, I'd like to make a job that you enjoy and you can do your best in, that feels like a gift almost. Whereas if it's like, how much to get out of you and what you're going to do for us, that's like extraction. And that is a really important difference, I think. And I think the world of work is going that way. It doesn't quite know how to do it. It's not, we've got fear still around mental health and well-being, what that means. We think far too individually. We don't think systemically enough. That most experience is shaped by the system we're in, and that we know that because we've worked in good and bad jobs. All of us have. And we were still the same person. So it was the fit with us, and it was the people and system around us. And you can get in very toxic systems or systems that only suit certain personality types. Like, I don't know if you've read Ray Dalio. You've read Ray Dalio's book. Have you read his book on? He's a.
I don't know him personally, but I lived in Connecticut for years, and I've coached not through Bridgewater, but privately people that work for Bridgewater. I know the system and the principles very well. Yeah,
and it clearly works. But I mean, when I read his book, I just thought, this is brutal. I mean, I just don't know.
It's considered, they call it inside the Revenge of the Nerds.
Right. Yeah. And so it might suit certain personality types, but it certainly wouldn't.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
Yeah. And Zappos wouldn't be for everybody either. And I think that's okay. I think businesses are allowed to have personalities in a sense.
Well, they do, whether you acknowledge it or not, they do.
Yes, that's very true. Very true. And I think actually most cultures unacknowledged, isn't it? You have a culture, you whether you acknowledge it, whether you understand it. And so I think actually demystifying culture is actually really important, because it sounds very nebulous. And so I will say quite strongly that the sign of a good culture is that people are happy there. And
I agree with that. So I have a question for you. If you were to design one question, just one, to gauge employee happiness, what would it be?
So I do have one question. And,
what is it?
And it is, we ask it every week. And it is, how happy were you at work this week? Or how did you feel at work this week? Depends. But the response is from very unhappy to very happy. And if you ask every week, okay, then this is an ask, okay?
You'll see a pattern. You'll see a pattern.
Absolutely. And resilience becomes like, how if you dip and how quickly you come back. And by measuring every week, you get into people's experience of work, really into it. If you only ask them once a year, you're just into general feeling. And that's okay.
I'll tell you what else I love about the once a week. As someone that's not really a data person, but I do work in patterns.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kidding myself in some way. Is then when you have the people that are the outliers to the norm of the group, it gives the company an opportunity to see what's going on with that person. Maybe they're struggling with something in their lives, and you could put them in the middle of nirvana, but maybe they're going through a divorce, if they have a sick child, So it actually it can create an outreach point for somebody's emotional well-being that's being impacted not by work, but wherever you go, there you are. So if you don't think your personal life is impacting your work and vice versa, then you're just delusional.
Absolutely. We take our happiness and unhappiness to work and back from work. Statistically, we call it spillover effects.
Okay.
From one domain to another, and they genuinely exist. And so in my work, we don't share individual scores. Okay, we reflect back to the individual their score, but we always group things in teams. And the reason is that we're looking for the systemic effects, and also to not expose people, because basically, if people know you can see their score, that's a different thing. I'm not saying that's impossible to do, but it's a different thing to do. So so let me challenge that.
Yeah. Okay. So I get the confidentiality for that. I absolutely get that. However, if you have a healthy culture, why would it not be okay for people to know that you're struggling with happiness at your job?
Yeah.
So that they can perhaps meet you and find out what's going on. Like, for example, when I'm teaching leadership and working with the company or teaching communication, and you have a sales guy that 2 quarters in a row missed his numbers.
Yeah.
Right. I will teach the manager to start the conversation with, as you know, you've missed 2 quarters of your numbers. Is anything going on for you that I can help you with? Yeah. As opposed to, you've missed 2 quarters, you miss again, you're out. Right.
Yeah.
But again, sales is numbers, so it's easy. But for what you're doing, what would be wrong with people maybe knowing somebody's struggling, assuming it's a healthy culture?
Yeah. So
not a culture where you eat your young.
Not a Ray Dalio. I don't know. The
young. Kind
of. But so I think that a great team leader does that. A good team leader does that.
Okay. But how can they do that if they don't know?
Because
if you don't share the numbers with them.
If you're, in my team, there's 7, 8 of us, and if the scores go down, you ask people how they are. But okay. As in, our scores went a bit flat earlier this year, and I think we're all feeling a bit flat in the business. And it's been a difficult year in the tech world because there's been a lot of redundancies, and so our clients, some weren't renewing and things like that, and so everyone felt a bit flat. And we talk about it, and so you can have those conversations about knowing the numbers, but when you're in a larger system, if you could see individuals' answers, you couldn't trust everyone in the system. And I think you can trust in your team. And whenever I look at an organization, there's not one culture. There's lots of microcultures. There's lots of cultures.
Well, it's like the country, right? In the States, you have the North, the South, the Midwest. It's different cultures.
Yeah, but we're also very shaped by our teams, in that if you look statistically at this, then someone's individual experience is much more shaped by the functionality of their team than the functionality of the whole organization. Now, of course, teams are more likely to be functional in a functional organization, more likely to be dysfunctional. But when you hold for that, so you have some teams, some team leaders are protecting their team against a difficult organizational culture. And they do that out of love for them or whatever, out of respect for them. And they do a great job. And that's where people's experience with. And other people, they're just not natural people leaders, and they're put in roles where they lead people, and they're rubbish, and the team is going to really feel that, even if the rest of the culture is. So it's very proximal, our experience of work. And so it's in the teams. That's why I concentrate very much on teams, because that's the biggest lever to change, creating team leaders. You will know this. They are so woefully unsupported. There's hardly any training in people skills. There is hardly any support for them. There's a lot of pressure on them to just deliver the results at whatever they do. And so you get this very difficult interface that goes on.
Okay, what would you say, in your experience, the biggest barrier to happiness in the workplace is?
Time.
How so?
Time pressure. Everybody is under huge time pressure.
And has that changed over the years, or has that been consistent?
So there's two things going on with time pressure, which is that long hours is actually decreasing across the economies. Of course, in professional services, in all sorts of things, that there's still very long hours and unpaid overtime. I mean, unpaid overtime can only take hold in sectors where they aren't unionized.
Does that happen? I mean, in the States, it's rampant, but I didn't think that would happen where you guys are.
So we work slightly less hours than the US. We certainly have longer holidays, but there certainly are sectors that work very long hours, and or parts of sectors, and that's not good. You don't get the best work out of people. Their 60th work in the week is not nearly as good as their first 40. Right. And the reason people do it is they can, because. So I would, and actually the people that work the longest hours, of course, the C-suite, they are the senior leaders. They work. But
they expect other people to work like they do. They're not, the other people aren't getting the money they're getting. And Absolutely. I think they're so out of touch with reality with those expectations.
I know that the figures are in the UK. I don't know what they are in the US, but in the UK, the average C-suite director works 12 hours overtime a week. Unpaid, right? The average manager works 6-7 hours overtime. It's a whole extra day. And the average sort of IT worker 4 or 5. So it cascades down and gets lower. But there's a lot of time pressure. But long hours aren't particularly getting worse, I will say. But intensity, the speed of work is increasing. Yeah. And with tech and always on, and then that is the real problem, I think, is the intensity. And the sort of, and that's counterproductive.
So how do you address that? Especially with tech, right? Now we have AI coming. So now it's like it's not that people are going to work less. They're just going to work more. They're going to be more productive. They're going to achieve more.
Well, I think it's about boundaries, and I think it's about respecting people's boundaries. So we're seeing a huge pressure from younger generations for more flexibility.
And they're not wrong. There's a lot of things they're wrong with, but they're not wrong with, they saw their parents work, I'll make it up, 19 years, get fired because at the 20th year they get a pension. That was bull. And they said they're not doing that. Now, some of them want to play too much, but I do think it's demographic. But honestly, the white middle-aged guys are the ones that are still have the keys to the kingdom. And actually, let me just take you off on a tangent for a moment. Tell me your thoughts on the whole working from home.
So
as it relates to happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. There is very little relationship between happiness and how many days you work from home or in the office. Where the relationship is if you are working the number of days you want to be from home, if it's aligned with what you are actually doing. So I think that we've obviously had a huge increase in remote first companies where they're only all remote. And what they're losing out on is collaboration. What they are losing some innovation, some ways that serendipity where people meet and bump into each other and come up with new ideas, but also the way that you brainstorm. You just can't do it as well on Zoom and other things, being in the room with it. However, what you also get is that, obviously we just sometimes we have work which needs to be collaborative. Sometimes we need to be on our own, doing our own thing. I think people do it very well from home. So I'm very pro flexibility. But I also think organizations need to be very clear with their boundaries. So are we, and I think we're seeing a lot of organizations that are saying we're 5 days a week back in the office. They will attract people to do that, but whether they keep people, I think sort of 3 days in the office and 2 from home is not bad. I'm actually a fan of the shorter working week. My organization's a 4-day-a-week organization, but I know that's too far for some people, but I think it's really good. I like having 3-day weekends. I don't actually take them very much, to be honest.
Who wouldn't? I will say this, and I'm watching the time, so I want to be respectful of your time. But in terms of the work from home, I think there's a very big variable. Working moms have been begging since the dawn of time to work from home. I can tell you when I was raising my kids, and the thought of, well, how do we know if you're working? Well, if that's what you're worried about, you shouldn't have that person working for you anyway, because they can be surfing the internet, sitting right next to you in the office.
Absolutely.
But I will say I will push back basically with, we are trying to solve a new paradigm problem with an old paradigm solution. So when you talk about collaboration and all that kind of, yes, of course. So we need a different solution. That's just my comment on that. I understand the innovation. I don't think it has to be that way. But, you're trying, it's like saying we don't need a car. Let's just get a faster horse. That's just my feeling on that. And I also think a lot of it has to do with the old school, command and control of leadership. I really do. There are certain jobs where you have to, of course, be in the office. Absolutely. But, you know that when you choose that profession, right?
Yes.
So I feel like I know many tech people, many attorneys commute to work to go into their office or cubicle and never talk to anybody all day long. It's a waste of time. And oh, by the way, I thought we all care about the climate.
Yeah, totally. There's all sorts of things. And I've got a friend, and he's the dad of one of my son's friends, and he's very high up in a law firm. And he said it's just impossible. I mean, when I was young, we worked 60-hour weeks, and now I'm a partner. Of course, the partners
law, the most non-progressive profession you could get. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as a partner, your profits as a partner are dependent on the long hours of the young people. And he said,
that's right.
They won't do it, Nick.
They won't do it. They won't.
And I said, to him, aren't they sensible? And he goes, yeah, but I did it, and it's now my turn to reap the things, and that's the thing that we're stuck with. And I think
you're right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It's like I started employing smart women 3 days a week if they wanted to work for me 3 days a week, because I knew I had their brains when they were pushing the pram or whatever like that. Right. And of course, it was brilliant. I thought it was. I mean, it was supportive.
And by the way, I used to tell women, and you're right, what you just said. It's a little disingenuous, but I'll let you get away with it, is a lot of women in the States would want to go back to work, but work part-time or 4 days a week or 3 days a week. I said, do not do it, because you're going to work full-time. You're just going to get paid for less days. Yeah. To your point.
I think that is something.
That's what you just said. They're pushing the stroller. They're thinking work.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
But I mean, absolutely. And I said it slightly tongue in cheek, but it's also
but
really
it's
important
true.
Really important to bring up children. And I actually worked shorter hours when my children were young. That was pretty rare. But the problem is career development. And this is the difficult sacrifice that most women have to make, is they have to choose between career development and family. And that's a ridiculous thing. It's a
false choice, right? It's
Absolutely.
a false choice that we've made.
Yeah.
That's what was the title of my first book, Not Tonight, Dear, I've Got a Business to Run.
Yeah.
And it was a whole work-life balance. Okay. I could talk to you forever. I love this. Happiness and work. I'm thinking of so many companies. I'm like, oh gosh, I'd love to introduce you to. I have two more questions. One is, what is the one song you can't live without?
The one
and
song.
Why? Mm-hmm.
I couldn't live without Leonard Cohen. And the album, I really love his album Darker, which he wrote just before he died. And I think I find most music is about youth. And what I love about Leonard Cohen is he's talking about the real life, Mm-hmm. So it'd be quite hard for me to choose one song from him, but maybe yeah, I don't know what one song. I'm trying to think. There's one. Yeah. I mean, maybe it is Darker itself. He's talking about how he's lost his relationship with God, and yet he's still here. I don't know, someone like him. I mean, I do absolutely love the Nat King Cole song Nature Boy. The greatest thing in life is to love and be loved in return, because I think it's beautiful. And I think reciprocity in relationships is the core of relationships. So it would be Leonard Cohen or that one, probably. I don't know. If I was on Desert Island Discs, we have that sort of thing in the UK. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, and then my last question to you is, imagine I found a box of everything you've ever lost in your life, and I gave it to you. What would be the one thing that you would pick out right away or look for, and why? The first thing.
Everything I've lost in life. I'm so unmaterialistic, but you don't necessarily mean material things, do you?
Correct.
God, I don't know. I like my life now. I don't feel my life has a sort of loss. I guess that, I think my loss, if we go back to my dad, when I looked at my children, how much I played with them, I think that is just such a loss of my dad, actually, that's, so I would prefer to have had a more playful relationship when I was young. And
that's of course, something you never had. That's not something you lost.
You're a hard taskmaster.
I am. Don't be fooled by this pretty little smile.
Something I've lost that I don't know how to answer that question, Patty. I don't know what are you looking for there? I mean, it's like
really, I hear everything. I'll let you think about it, and you can email me, and we'll find a way to let the listeners know. All right, Nic, what I would love for you to do is I want you to unabashedly promote yourself. Tell people where they go, where they can learn more about you, everything. Just go.
Okay, so I'm a statistician, and I've created a platform for businesses to measure the happiness of teams. It's called Friday Pulse. You can go to fridaypulse.com and you can find out more about it. If you want to know about how happy you are at work, you can go to a website just called friday1one.com, and you can do a 5-minute questionnaire on your own happiness at work, and it will give you a report and challenge you about what's your work like. So it's a bit like one of those 16 personalities ones that you do, but it's not a Myers-Briggs. It's about your happiness at work. So those are the two things I would say: is go to Friday One, look at yourself, go to fridaypulse.com if you run a business and you want to understand more about how to measure team happiness in your business. And it's really, really worth having happy teams. They are more successful teams. They're more collaborative. They're more creative. They retain staff more. They're healthier. They're more productive. There's just so many good successes of happy teams, and they are really achievable. It's about people skills in the business and supporting team leaders to dare to have better conversations, which I'm sure is what you're about. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so Nic, thank you so much. This is one of my funnest, I don't know if that's a word, conversations. And I know our listeners really took so much out of it. So I really encourage people to, take heed, listen to Mark's words, to Nic's words, take it very seriously, because I don't think anybody's ever said at the end of their life they've been too happy, or at the end of a job they've been too happy, right? So thank you, Nic. And that concludes Dr. Patty Ann's podcast for today. And since I know you were going to love, I told you were going to love this, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, be happy and be well. Bye-bye.